Jordan Tyson is easily one of the most controversial fantasy assets this offseason. Now, his talent and his tape are undeniable. He's a great rookie prospect. However, that's not what people are questioning. They're worried about his injury history, his knee that was blown up, his broken collarbone, and last but not least, his recurrent hamstring injuries. Now, I know this isn't something that's new, unless you've been living under a rock. This has been a major talking point regarding Jordan Tyson for the past 3 to 4 months, probably even before that. But here's what the average Twitter doctor, fantasy football analyst isn't going to break down for you, and that's the research behind his injuries. Not only that, but I'm a physical therapist. So I'm going to be giving you guys a research-backed, clinically nuanced take on Jordan Tyson's injury history. Now, let's start with Jordan Tyson's knee injury in 2022. Now, it's important to distinguish this is not just an isolated ACL tear. He tore multiple ligaments, his ACL, his PCL, and his MCL. This is an important differentiator because after multi-ligament knee injuries, there's a massive production dip when the player returns. Of course, we know this didn't happen with Jordan Tyson, so that's a massive green flag, right? Not only that, but what we know about the religamentization process is one, it never actually returns to the full strength of for example, the prior ACL pre-injury, but at about 2 years, it reaches the full strength that it's going to get to. So we're obviously crossed that threshold of 2 years. So another green flag for Tyson. The production is not a concern. The concern for that multi-ligament knee injury is the elevated risk of re-injury. And in fact, research shows that the risk continues to elevate for up to 15 years after a multi-ligament knee injury. Now, this is much higher compared to an isolated ACL tear. That's why this is such a big concern. So here's where I'll push back a little bit on the data. Most of these people did not have elite NFL organizations behind them, right? They didn't have the data analysts, the elite rehab teams helping them, guiding them through these injuries over the course of up to 15 years in some cases. The fact that Tyson already defied odds of the research by producing at a high level, I'm willing to give him a pass on this elevated injury risk as well. He likely is more at risk of an NFL knee injury compared to other athletes in the league, but it's not something that I'm going to fade him for. Interestingly enough, I was going to write off Jordan Tyson's collarbone injury without even really thinking about it. But after going through some research, it appears that there's a elevated risk for those that undergo the conservative treatment option after a collarbone injury. In fact, 4 out of 7, I know it's a small amount, but it was NFL players that they looked at actually refractured their collarbone within a year. But those who underwent the surgical treatment option and had their collarbone repaired through surgery, all of them had no refracture. Luckily, Jordan Tyson was one of those who underwent the surgical option, so this is something I'm not worried about. Now, the most concerning part, and the part that probably all of you are wondering about, his recurrent hamstring injuries. Okay, so let's get his history fully down regarding his hamstring. So he missed 3 games with a hamstring strain in October. His hamstring later flared up in March, causing him to miss on the field work, scouting combine, and Arizona's pro day. Now, this was cited as a hamstring lingering injury as an official explanation. Then, most recently, it came out that he wasn't participating in rookie minicamp in May because of a lingering hamstring issue. Coaches did say that they were ramping him up, and probably that is the case. Now, here's where it gets pretty interesting. Jordan Tyson returned in late November to play his last 2 college games. The research shows that there's a 15-week window from return to play, not from when the injury occurred, from when they returned to a competitive high-level game. So that would be the end of November. There's a 15-week window of an elevated re-injury risk. This takes us right around to March. I think there could be a case for they didn't want him to re-injure his hamstring at the combine. They didn't want him to re-injure his hamstring at rookie minicamp, so they're playing it extra careful. That could be the reason why he's not been participating in all these different activities, or it could be that there was a flare-up. So there's 2 distinct possibilities in this, especially when you're a top 10 NFL draft pick. you're going to want to make sure that hamstring gets rehabbed appropriately, gets the appropriate rest, is strengthened nicely before you do any of those significant explosive movements. So there is a possibility that they're just being extra careful with it. Let's take the worst case scenario though. Say that he did have a flare up in March. This 15-week window doesn't reset. Again, the 15-week window of elevated re-injury risk starts once they return to competitive play. So let's say even a preseason game is considered competitive play. That won't be until August. That's most of the season that he's going to be playing with an elevated re-injury risk. But here's the part that I don't really like because so much of it is up in the air. Option A, he wanted to play it safe. He didn't want to go through these intense explosive training sessions and risk re-injuring it in the combine or just in the practice for it. Option 2, he actually did have a flare-up causing him to skip the combine and ultimately play it safe and have to ramp up in rookie minicamp. I think he was playing it safe. I think he had a group of rehab professionals that were helping him saying, listen, these explosive movements that you're doing every day in terms of training for a 40-yard dash, training for these other high explosive training, combine training drills, there's a good chance that hamstring may flare up. And there's a good chance that even if it doesn't flare up, your numbers aren't going to look as good as they could if you would just wait. I think that is ultimately what happened. And I think they're just being extra careful with him, ramping him up like the coaches said, not playing him and not really practicing in rookie minicamp. That is my opinion. Here's the important part though. Regardless of either scenario, will his production take a dip? The answer is no. No, his production will not take a dip. And that's, I mean, look at Mike Evans. Yes, he was at a high risk of re-injury, but he was producing when his hamstring was letting him. So there's research behind this. Apart from the case study of Mike Evans, there's some other research studies that suggest that Jordan Tyson won't suffer a performance dip as well. There's a study of professional soccer players that they did where it showed there were slight decreases in sprint speed, slight decreases in sprint distance, but there were minimal differences in the levels that they were performing at prior to their injury. Soccer players make explosive sprints, quick turns, they have explosive footwork, pretty similar to a wide receiver. So I think we can make that parallel there to Jordan Tyson. But key takeaway, not a return to performance problem for Jordan Tyson. It's managing his re-injury. And again, those two scenarios, there are different risks based on which one we buy into. So that's what we're going to have to consider with Jordan Tyson. This is a case where we have to continue to observe, continue to watch. If there are reports that he's continuously having flare-ups, well, then we can probably conclude that the second scenario is more likely because he is pretty much well and cleared from the 15-week return to play from late November at this stage. If reports are that he's still missing practice when the practices resume, that's not a good sign. So that's maybe an area where we can fade him a little bit more. In Dynasty, I'm not worried about him long term. Hamstring injuries, while they can be recurrent, with the right rehab program, with elite rehab professionals behind him, I'm sure even if he does get re-injured this year, they'll be able to handle rehabbing him in the long run. Well, of course, there is the slightly elevated risk of the recurrent knee injury. I'm willing to, same thing, give him maybe a little bit of a pass on that because he did defy the odds with producing after that multi-ligament knee injury, which not many professional high-level athletes can say. Lastly, it's important to realize he's an explosive, high-level NFL athlete that has defied odds time and time again. He's more than just a study. Yes, these studies may say elevated re-injury risk. For all we know, they could have been, looking at Joe Schmo from down the road. So This guy is different. He's a top 10 NFL draft pick for a reason. The Saints know what they're buying into. They know the injury history behind him, and they're confident that he's the man for their team. I believe Tyson will be a fantastic fantasy asset to own. And in my opinion, I think he'll put to bed his injury concerns this year. If you made it this far in the video, appreciate you. Comment down below what other fantasy asset I should take a look into next. I'm trying to make this into a series, so be sure to comment down below. But yeah, be sure to subscribe for more fantasy football content, injury content, and takes from physical therapists, where it's a little bit different compared to some of the other fantasy football creators, where yes, they can give opinions on their injuries, but they don't really have a clinical opinion. Whereas I deal with several injuries, sports injuries, pretty much every day. So yeah, appreciate you guys. Subscribe for more.